Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. It feels like it's been a hot second since I've been up here because 2 weeks ago I was in main service. Last week we had a party, and so now we're like kind of back to normal, except for we're at a different time. So it's a little bit different. You guys like the 9:30 time? You get an extra 30 minutes to sleep in before you come up here? Yeah? No? It'll be an adjustment, but I'm looking forward to it. Fun fact, I got to attend service this morning at 8 o'clock, which I've never been able to do before. So it's kind of nice to be able to have that morning service for people like me who usually am with the lovely people like you. So anyway, we are starting a brand new series today called Caught Up. Now, how many of you guys have been caught up in something, maybe something your friend was into, maybe it's a hobby, maybe it's a show, maybe it's a movie, whatever it is, turn to the person next to you. You got 30 seconds. What's something you've been most caught up in lately? Go. All right, I heard spider web. What else? What have you been caught up in? What? Softball, yes. Anybody in sports that just like, yeah, that'll do it. What was yours?
These things are getting caught up in my hair.
Your earrings are getting caught up in your hair. Okay, fair enough. What else? Anybody else? Say it louder. Socializing, yeah. Life, caught up in life. Living and loving life. All right, when I was, I'll tell you, when I was your guys' age, you know what I was caught up in? I was caught up, well, yes, always Star Wars, okay? But I was going to say a video game, and the video game was Star Wars, okay? But yes, I was going to say a video game, and the video game I was thinking was Star Wars. Anybody played Battlefront? Yeah. I still have the PS2 version of Battlefront at my house, and it's the only video game console I have to this day. I want a PS5 so I can play the newest one, or the new Jedi Fallen Order, whatever that one is. Anyway, so instead I just am a nerd and watch YouTube clips of it because I'm not cool enough to have the game, but I want to know the story. So anyway, when I was really young, I got caught up in like the Dark Forces Star Wars games that were like I played on a PC. Like X was jump, spacebar was duck. Like it was like crazy weird to play now. But anyway, they had it on the PlayStation 1, and I eventually bought that when I had my PS2 because PS2 could play PS1 games. And so anyway, but fun stuff, right? Last year, around this time, you know what I was caught up in? Season 4 of Stranger Things. Anybody else? Like, each episode was like a 2-hour movie. And so, like, I'd sit down each night. It's, like, really hard to binge a show that's, like, movie length in each episode. But it's so good. Some of you maybe not old enough to watch it. That's okay. It's someday when you can appreciate it, you'll maybe like it. Some people don't like it at all. Anybody who've watched it and like, nope, that's gross and weird. I don't like that kind of stuff. It's very sci-fi-y. Yeah, I like it. But we've all been there. We've been obsessed with something, caught up in something, caught up in the moment, caught up in a show, caught up in your earrings or your hair maybe. But we've all been caught up somewhere. And so what we're going to be talking about this entire series is something that all of us tend to get caught up in. It's not a middle school thing. It's not just like a school thing. It's a everybody thing. Like, no matter your age, this is something that will follow you around for your entire life, and that is comparison, right? We all get caught up in comparison. And honestly, it makes sense why we do, because we want to gauge how we're doing, right? But unfortunately, I think comparison does more harm than good most of the time. You've probably like thought about this or maybe heard somebody talk about it before, but it's when we compare something about ourselves against something about someone else, right? When we compare ourselves with something about someone else. And it's really easy to do. You maybe love your brand new shoes until you see your friends show up in their new school shoes and you're like, dang it, theirs are cooler than mine, right? It's when you, how many of you are on social media? Anybody? Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok? Don't get TikTok. But it's actually, at your age, don't get any of them. But I know that some of you have it. So it's really easy, because those algorithms are made to make you compare yourself to everything else that you see, right? It's just not healthy, right? There's so many issues with it. But that's where most of us are. I mean, I rag against it, but I have it. I have social media, right? And so it can be easy to get caught up in that. Maybe you think that your grade was really good. You did great on the test until you're talking with your friends after class and you realize that, oh, they all did better than me. Okay, well, I was feeling good about my B. Now I'm not feeling great, right? Comparison tends to make us feel that way at times. Maybe you're feeling good about how many views you got on your latest video, if you do have social media, until you look at your friends and see how many views that they have racked up on theirs. Comparison is easy to catch us all up and get us sucked into it. When we get sucked into this comparison trap, then it just tends to skew our perspective on everything. And so there's got to be a better way to deal with it, right? Many of you guys, you know all about this because maybe you're conscious of it. Some of you didn't realize that's what you were doing until we're talking about it now, and you're like, oh, I think I do this. I think I'm guilty of this, right? And you don't have to have social media, but it brings up all kinds of emotions for us. Some of us, it's disappointment, right? We look at those around us and we feel like we don't measure up and we're just disappointed with ourselves. Or we see what everybody else has and what we don't have, and it makes us disappointed with what we have, right? It can stir up that. Maybe others of us, maybe we get frustrated because we think we deserve something that somebody else has and they don't deserve it, but we deserve it so much better, and it makes us frustrated, right? We get mad that we're not at the same level that we should be. Something's holding us back, and somebody else is unfairly getting to pull ahead. Or maybe the feelings of comparison in your life just makes you feel hopeless. You feel like, I'm never going to be able to do what they do. I'm never going to be that guy. I'm never going to be able to X, Y, Z. Whatever it is. Comparison can make you feel like, well, why even try? I can't compete, so I'm not going to let myself down by trying. And so we just kind of give up before we've even started. Maybe for some of you, comparison actually motivates you. Maybe for those of you who are on a sports team, you raised your hand a minute ago, especially if you're in something like track or soccer or basketball where you're running a lot, if you got somebody with you that's pushing you, it motivates you because you're able to push each other further. So maybe comparison actually kind of motivates you because you're like, I can achieve that because they can do it, so then I can do it, and then it motivates you. I think this is the rare case, but sometimes that's healthy. Comparison may even help you feel really good about yourself, though, because you'll look at yourself and you'll look at everybody else and you'll be like, oh, I'm way better than all these chums, right? And then, but the reality is, we always all have room to grow in lots of areas of our lives. So we get hung up on one area that we seem to be doing better than everybody else, even if it's not up to God's standards, but we think we're better than everybody else around us. We'll feel better by comparison, so we compare in order to make ourselves feel better. Right? Some of you maybe are more guilty of that one than any of the others. But no matter how comparison makes you feel, the thing is it never really takes you anywhere. Comparison isn't actually a good tool that you can utilize that will take you anywhere in life. It'll get you distracted thinking on things that don't matter. So, there's got to be a better way to deal with it. And so today, we're going to look into one of the letters that Paul wrote to the early church, because this was something that even back then, they wrestled with. I told you this is not just like a middle school thing. This is like a people thing. Everybody has struggled with this since the beginning of time, right? We struggle with comparison. Go all the way back to Cain and Abel, right? Cain saw Abel's sacrifice and thought, wow, he's making me, he got the frustrated emotions, right? He's making me look bad. And so then he took Abel out, right? This is as old as time, right? Hopefully for none of you, you actually get the murder vibes after feeling comparison, right? But we don't get there by accident. It all starts somewhere. And so Paul, writing to the early church, this is what he said in 2 Corinthians. He said, oh, don't worry. We wouldn't dare say that we are as wonderful as these other men who tell you how important they are, but they are only comparing themselves with each other, using themselves as the standard for measurement. How ignorant. Right? Basically what he's saying, yeah, these other people, these false teachers, they're telling you how great and spiritual they are. Right? You met anybody like that? It's holier than thou. And it makes you kind of sick to be around them because you can kind of see that they're kind of faking it. And some of them maybe you can't tell, but they just make you feel really bad about yourself. Right? Paul's don't worry about those people who are bragging about their own spirituality, but they're only comparing themselves to each other and not to God's standards. So don't worry about them, is what Paul is saying in this situation. But the same is true for us, right? Comparing yourself to other people isn't good. It's not smart. It's not wise. It isn't helpful, and it won't take you anywhere. So let's just not do it, okay? That's what Paul is basically saying. when we compare ourselves to each other, we get caught up. When we hold our real life up to somebody else's social highlights, right? For those of you who have social media, you see people's highlight reels, you see what they post, and maybe that doesn't measure up with your real life. Or maybe when we compare the way our family looks to the way another family looks, or when we look at what we have in comparison to somebody else, we always end up losing. And we can never break free from that cycle if we're constantly comparing, even if you get something great, right? If you get what you've always dreamed of, then there's going to be the next thing. And you're going to be comparing what you have now to the next level. And it's just a cycle that will continually feed itself. It's not healthy. It won't take you anywhere. So let's just not do it. That's what Paul's saying here. People have wrestled with this since the dawn of time, all right? He's saying let's not play that game anymore. Because when we do that, when we compare, we're looking in the wrong place. We're comparing our imperfect, flawed lives to somebody else's, imperfect, flawed life. They're not the standard. Even if we're around them a lot, it can be easy for us to think that that's the golden standard, but he's the golden standard. And what he says for our lives is actually what matters more than what anybody else around us is doing. So, Paul then continues. He said, when people commend or compliment or praise themselves, it doesn't count for much. The important thing is for the Lord to commend them. Right? Basically, if someone's walking up and they're just talking about all their achievements, how great they are and stuff, like, one, it's distasteful, so you don't like that. But two, it's not really saying much because I can brag on myself. Oh, look how cool I am. Look at what I've accomplished. I can beat anybody in Battlefront. Yeah, don't tread on me, right? I can brag about myself, but until I actually play against one of you guys in here and then I'm toast, right? Then I'm only as good as I present myself to be to everybody else. But it's a false measurement for success or achievement. Let other people point out what's good in you. Let God point out what's good in you. Don't brag on yourself, right? Social media, for the most part, for a lot of people, is just one big humble brag. And it's not fair for you to compare your real life to somebody else's highlight reel. It's just not how we're designed to work. Now, there's good things about social media too, okay? I'm ragging on it a lot because that's the most easy comparison when we're talking about comparison. See what I did there? I didn't even mean to do that. It just came out. Thanks for the sympathy laugh. I appreciate it. But it's easy to rag on that. But the reality is, all of us have a lot of tools that we can use. Some of you are great at math. Some of you are great at soccer. Some of you are great with people. Some of you are great at standing kind of a little distant and observing and discerning wisdom from a situation. All of us have different things that we're good at. So don't compare what you're good at with what somebody else isn't, or vice versa. We don't operate that way. And when we are at school around hundreds of other people, or when we're online with millions of other people, it's really easy to fall into that trap and play that game. Paul's saying don't do it. Don't get caught up in that. Don't get caught up on praising yourself. Only worry about what God praises you for. Let God be the one to commend you. Here's why this matters. Because God doesn't compare you to others. Here's a game we like to play a lot. Is we'll look at ourselves. We'll know we're flawed, right? How many of you know you've made mistakes before? Yeah, hopefully that's all of us. We know we're flawed. But in order to cope with that, or make ourselves feel better, instead of relying on God's grace, what many of us do is we'll look to our friends. We'll go, let's see, I need to get out of this situation. I could lie. Well, it's a small lie. And you'll look to your friend who's in out-of-school suspension for lying and among other things. You're like, well, mine isn't that bad compared to that. And so we'll go ahead with whatever we're being tempted with because it's not as bad as so-and-so. But God says not to lie. So his standard is pretty black and white. But when we start to compare, we start to make everything a gray issue that maybe isn't a gray issue. Maybe it is right or wrong. but we'll kind of justify our way into making it right if we're comparing to those around us. When we hold ourselves up to the imperfect, flawed standard of those around us, we fall short of the standard that God has for us, and we stop pushing to reach the standard that God's laid out for us. Does that make sense? It's a little game we play with comparison. It's really not a like us game. It's a us game when we mess with comparison. And God doesn't compare you to others. So check this out. This is what a proverb says. It says, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. One of the best ways you can guard your heart is to get out of this cycle of comparison. To protect yourself from some of those feelings that we were talking about earlier. Right? So one, because comparison starts in our hearts. So one, I want you to pay attention to your feelings. Pay attention to those things that you start to feel, whether they're positive, negative, whether you think you're better because of those around you or you're worse because of those around you. Whatever it is, pay attention to when you start feeling some of those emotions. And secondly, find out what's causing it. Right? If you can identify what it is you're feeling in the moment and then trace it back to a specific trigger, to something in particular that you're wrestling with, or something that's going on in your life, that will help you better identify the solution. Which I think, when it comes to comparison, is number 3, celebrate what you do have. Celebrate what you do have. Because often those negative emotions that we feel, or maybe those arrogant emotions that we feel, are tied back to a comparison with what other people do or don't have. And when we instead drop that and just look at my own life, celebrate what I do have, you're going to be able to focus more on the positive things because you're looking and paying attention. You're going to be more grateful. So celebrate what's good in your life. Celebrate what's positive. Celebrate what God is doing in your life now and not spending your time dreaming for what you wish you had later. So 1, pay attention to your feelings. 2, find out what's causing it. And 3, celebrate what you do have, because God doesn't compare you to others. And we shouldn't either. So as you go to your small groups, think about this question. What's one area of your life that you tend to compare to others? What's an area of your life that you tend to compare yourself to others? I want you to think about that while I pray. You're going to go to your small groups, and you're to continue this conversation, and then we will be done for the morning. So would you guys bow your heads? Pray with me.